The next speaker of the night is Susan Griggs. This is her first speech, her icebreaker. It is titled My Call from God. This talk will explain how she made the big move across the country and into the ministry.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be here. As most of you probably have figured out, I'm not from Washington. That seems to be something that everybody has noticed and asked me where I'm from. I actually, however, am from Puerto Rico, and you probably can't guess that from my accent, but have been in New England for most of my adult life. But as a child growing up in Puerto Rico, I enjoyed being outside, being by myself, climbing trees, and I spent a lot of time on my own. And I found myself really being able to spend a lot of time talking to God and being close to God. And I guess my mother must have noticed that, because she told me years later that she thought I'd become a nun. Well, I never, ever had any interest in becoming a nun, because I got the impression it would really be exciting to be loved by a husband and to have children. And I spent a lot of time figuring out how I would be a better parent than my mother. So it never was in my plan to become a nun. However, I did probably have that nudge from God that I was supposed to do something that was pleasing to Him. And so when I was in high school, one day I felt that somebody from the sky was calling me. And I interpreted this as God calling me. And all I heard was my name. No big, great speech. However, I interpreted this as God calling me to sacrifice myself and do something to follow Him. My first reaction was to run the other way. I didn't want to sacrifice my plans. After all, I had great ideas of how to live in this world and enjoy it. So while I had spent so much time as a child talking to God and really feeling close to God, I stopped that. That was not something I really was pursuing any longer. I went to college, I got married fairly young. I then became a school psychologist, or I studied to become a school psychologist and started having a family. My husband, however, decided to divorce me because he wanted to marry another woman. I was devastated. I had thought that God had provided me all these strengths and skills, and I had just flubbed up. I had become a failure. I had not used my skills to be able to be successful in my marriage. I became depressed and really started re-examining all my priorities, all my values, all my plans. While being so depressed, I started asking help from the pastor that was nearest by. One day he was at my house giving me some counseling, and all of a sudden I realized that I was late to pick up my daughter. I rushed off to go pick her up, crying in the car and feeling just so distraught. All of a sudden, I felt that God put His arms around me and comforted me. I was totally so ecstatic, so happy, so joyful. And it caused me to want to respond to that call that I had gotten as a child and as a teenager to follow him. At that point, however, I realized that with young children, it would be impossible, in my mind, to go into the seminary and become a minister at that point. And thus, I decided to follow the call by continuing and being a school psychologist and becoming a lay minister, a lay speaker. A lay speaker is somebody who goes and is a substitute for a pastor when they can't lead a worship service. So for the next 30 years, I did that. I had great messages from God to cause me to then give good sermons and to be a good lay speaker. 2.5 years ago, however, well, no, 4 years ago, but 2.5 years after I had gotten remarried, my husband died, and I had to re-examine my life. At that point, I knew that I could become a local pastor by taking courses in the summer. And so I decided that I would do that. And as I walked around the block with my dog one day, all of a sudden I saw the first spring flower in my garden, even though I had a shady garden and had never had the first spring flower. Which then told me to go and seek new life. Go ahead and become a local pastor then, and go wherever that should take me. Since my children, shortly after my husband's death, moved away to Hawaii and to Seattle, I decided that I would follow them and go into the ministry here. Therefore, at this time, there was no question that the sacrifice that I had refused, I had rejected as a child or as a young person, was one that was too much for me. I accepted the challenge and felt like I was Abraham going across to this new place I didn't know anything about, leaving all my support systems behind and coming here. Thus, I challenge you to see the possibilities just as Leon gave us, and see how you're being called, so that instead of having some ludicrous way of living your life, you will be fulfilled totally. Thank you.